So I've thought about doing this before, and one of the things that often I'd say, well, hasn't really surprised me, but the Yorkshire Post has had, really since before and after the referendum, some really good articles about how this area is going to be affected if we leave. And none of them have been good. We've gone over the past about how badly this area, one of the main areas to vote for leave, is going to be affected by this. So one of the wonderful things is, obviously, letters to the editor. And oh boy, I've thought about doing this before, but there's 4 in this one, and this was from the 20th of September. This edition was from, so I've been putting this off for a while. But these were amazing because it shows you the level of sort of anti-EU propaganda you have to try and cut through to many of these people. So, this one's from a guy called Gordon Lawrence from Sheffield. So, I'd like to congratulate Ken Cook, the Yorkshire Post, 11th September, for his courage in attempting to confront the Brexit cause on its own ground. He cites 3 main components of this bizarre system of democracy that demands some democratic evaluation. So there was a post basically talking about how the EU is democratic and how it works. And you're about to see this guy completely, well, you see for yourself. So first, the Commission, the driving force of Brussels, the interior of new laws and regulations. I can only describe this as being as democratic as a stag rut at mating time, since all the commissions are appointed by a clandestine process. The commissioners are appointed by the EU Parliament. You know, and they are put forward by the blocs that exist in the EU Parliament. Just like there are Labour and the Conservatives, if there is like a position open, the Labour or Conservatives of their party will put forward candidates. And by the way, in the past, the UKIP themselves have put forward candidates to stand, but they've always lost. Just want to point that out for you, Gordon. So second, the Council of Ministers, who play a controlling role in legislation, consist, besides Britain, of 27 other ministers, none whom are elected by UK voters. But yours is, and your minister in that Council of Ministers has just as much power over as many of the other ministers. You are all the ministers are equal in that council. In the past, we have vetoed moves, and we have not joined things because they have been vetoed in the Council of Ministers. We are not part of Schengen because we vetoed not being in Schengen. Who are we? Where are we? Elected by the UK voters. In Ken Cook's view, every bit as democratic as the UK, which it is. Third, the European Parliament is more or less a nodding donkey in passing laws introduced by the Commission and the Council, even though it has the power to reject or amend such legislation. And this goes to show you, if this guy actually goes and looks at the laws and legislation that have passed through Parliament, the EU Parliament, you would see that they're not nodding donkeys. There is opposition to a lot of the laws that have passed through, and some laws haven't gone through, and they've been amended and changed. You know? Britain's representatives, namely the MEPs, are voted in by electorate, and are a small minority, 73 out of 751 in the decision-making of that legislature. What do you want? Do you want Britain to be like the controlling majority in the EU Parliament? Do you want no other country to have their own equal say in the EU. you know, this is exactly what I'm getting at. This guy has no idea how the EU Parliament actually works. So Ken Cook finally concludes that direct rule from the EU would further Yorkshire's and the North's interest by sidelining London. It is zero democracy his ultimate aim. You can, in that area, we'd have six MEPs, if I remember rightly. No, probably more than that. I can't remember now what the exact number is. We would have the North, and Yorkshire itself has more of a powerful say in the goings on of the EU Parliament than it does in the UK's Parliament. So, so all I've got to say in response to that. So here's another one from Arthur from Moor Road, Meltham. If Remainers win, Britain will be penalised by the EU for deciding to challenge its authority. No, they wouldn't. There is no move that the EU Parliament or the EU could actually make to penalise the UK for this decision if it gets overturned. And I love this one. This is Arthur. Germany may well seize the opportunity to score back for its humiliations in 1918 and 1945. I cannot believe he has actually written that. That's hilarious. The minor difficulties stemming from no-deal Brexit will be dwarfed by lengthy and severity of Britain's punishment for daring to challenge the EU. There is no evidence at all whatsoever that the EU would punish us. And then the turmoil from within Europe will inevitably lead to the collapse of the whole EU structure. What? How is... Okay, so in this guy's mind, Britain, we had the referendum, it got overturned, the EU has decided to punish us, and then somehow this leads to the collapse of the EU. I'm just lost for words at that. Assuming, of course, that Germany does not simply close its iron fist around the continent. So, Angela Merkel is going to take over Europe somehow. Yeah. And people say that this is got nothing to do with a lot of people's fears of World War II and the anti-German phobia that the anti-Eurosceptics have been stoking up for years. Remember, if you go back to the 90s, in fact, you can probably find them on YouTube, there are a couple of, like, UKIP propaganda videos, and they all start, one in particular, starts with Patrick Moore introducing the EU as a continuation of the Third Reich and the creation of a Fourth Reich by Germany. So this one's from Barry from Wakefield. So Labour will vote against any deal on Brexit, and Diane Abbott will go back to Tony Blair. Let Tony Blair's "let everyone in" policy. It wasn't a "let anyone in" policy at all, Barry. There were rules and regulations, and as we've discovered recently, the migrants from the European Economic Area have a far more beneficial to this country than a non-European Economic Area migrant. Not only do they pay more in tax they take far less out than a non-European migrant. So, and that's a fact. So I'm sorry there, Barry. No surprise there then. What is a surprise is the number of people prepared to vote for Labour, set up of Marxist and left-wing agitators prepared to sell this country down the river. A lot of these leftist Marxist policies, Barry, already exist a lot further on and are a lot more, shall we say, advanced state in like Germany or, the Nordic countries. A lot of these are very basic concepts. And they're not that objectionable. You seem to just have an objectionable that they're, Marxist and left-wing. So he continues, either they are too thick to realise what's going on within Labour, so he's just literally called the entire North thick. Bear in mind, when Remainers like me come out and say a lot of these people don't know what they're talking about and get accused of calling these people thick, this guy's actually called all people in the North who vote Labour thick. What are the Brexiteers going to respond to him about that? Or simply don't care. Woe betide this country if these idiots get in power. Oh dear. Oh dear. So this one is, we want our country back, from Paul from Skipton. So yet another Remainer, the Yorkshire Post, September 18th, accuses me and millions of Leave voters for being misguided. We knew what we were voting for, our country back. Except that was just a slogan, Paul. That doesn't mean anything in the long term. And it has been explained to you, this idea that we didn't have sovereignty was a complete lie and fabrication by the Leave campaign. We were a sovereign nation. We had control over our own laws. But my question is this. Should there be a second vote? And if common sense prevails, and leaving the EU is the majority decision, which according to a lot of polls, it no longer is, Paul, will they finally shut up and let those of us with this country's best interest at the heart get on with leaving the EU? This is... That's just so ridiculous, because we know leaving the EU is not going to be a good idea. Every single expert out there is going, you're going to have years and decades of problems. You are voting to be worse off than you are now. And all these problems, Paul, that you might be suffering have not been caused by the EU. It has been caused by the austerity that you, by the way, didn't vote for, because none of these austerity measures were in the Conservative manifesto. Both times they were voted in, they came in very quickly after. I'm lost for words. I really am, but... So that's the Yorkshire Post. If I see any more, shall we say, good, interesting, it'll be good, essentially, because those are just ridiculous, to be honest.